Daniel Carter slammed the wrench down so hard it cracked the concrete floor, and the sound echoed through the empty shop like a gunshot. His hands were shaking, not from anger, from the paper he'd just read. The medical bill. $47,000. Due in 30 days. He pressed his knuckles against his mouth and stared at the ceiling, breathing, just barely breathing. Then the front door opened, and a woman in a wheelchair rolled in from the rain-soaking wet jaw, set tight like someone who had never once in her life asked anyone for help. Neither of them knew that tonight would change everything. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story is traveling. And if this one hits you right in the chest, subscribe and hit that bell, because this story is only getting started. The rain had been falling since 4 in the afternoon. The kind of steady, relentless rain that didn't care about your plans, your mood, or the fact that you hadn't eaten since 6 in the morning. Daniel Carter cared about none of those things anyway. He hadn't for a long time. He was 44 years old, lean in the way that men get lean when they forget to sit down for meals, not from discipline, but from exhaustion. His dark hair was threaded with gray at the temples. His hands were rough, permanently stained at the knuckles from oil that no amount of soap ever fully reached. And his eyes, gray-green, the kind that looked like they had once known how to laugh, carried the particular weight of a man who had been strong for too long, without anyone ever being strong for him. The shop was his, Carter's Auto and Repair, a modest place on the edge of Millbrook, Ohio. 2 bays, a waiting area with 4 plastic chairs, and a coffee machine that worked maybe 60% of the time. He'd bought it 11 years ago with a small business loan and more optimism than sense back when Sarah was still alive, and the future felt like something you could actually reach out and hold. Sarah. He didn't let himself think about her for more than a few seconds at a time anymore. It was a survival skill he'd developed slowly, painfully, over the 3 years since she'd died. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed in March, gone by October. Fast and merciless the way that disease often was, like it couldn't be bothered to give them enough time to say everything they needed to say. They hadn't said everything. He still thought about that. But tonight, he had a different problem sitting on the workbench in front of him. The bill from Millbrook General had arrived in the mail that afternoon. He'd opened it absently, the way you open something you're not expecting to hurt you. And then the number hit him like a physical thing. $47,312. Balance due. Payment required within 30 days. Emma's appendix, 3 weeks ago. Emergency surgery at 2 in the morning. His 8-year-old daughter on a gurney, her little face the color of chalk, her hand gripping his fingers so tight it left marks. The surgery had gone well. Emma had gone back to school. She had drawn him a picture of the 2 of them holding hands outside the shop and put it on the refrigerator with a sunflower magnet. The bill had waited. And now here it was. Daniel had stood at the workbench for a long time after reading it. He'd run the numbers in his head because that's what you did when you couldn't afford to panic. The shop brought in decent money in a good month. But it hadn't been a good month. Hadn't been a good several months, truth be told. New auto shop opened up on Route 9 in the spring, corporate-backed with a loyalty app and free coffee that actually worked every time. He'd lost accounts, good accounts, and the winter was coming, and Emma needed new shoes, and the water heater in the house had been making a sound he didn't like. He'd set the bill face down on the workbench so he didn't have to keep looking at it. And then he'd picked up his wrench and gone back to work because that was the only thing he knew how to do. He was underneath a 2019 Ford F-15. Oh, when he heard it, a sound from outside, just barely audible over the rain. A high-pitched mechanical whine, rhythmic and strained, like something working harder than it was designed to work. He stayed still for a moment listening. Then he rolled out from under the truck, stood up, and walked to the bay door. The woman was trying to get up the small ramp that led to the shop's entrance. The ramp wasn't steep. He'd installed it himself 6 years ago for a customer who'd needed it, but her wheelchair was fighting her. The motor was making that whining sound with every inch of forward movement, grinding and complaining, and the chair was drifting slightly to the left, as it climbed like the right rear wheel wasn't pulling its weight. She was soaked. Her dark coat was plastered to her shoulders. Her hair, black and cut sharp at the jaw, was flat against her face. She was leaning forward slightly, jaw clenched, both hands gripping the armrests of the chair. She was not asking for help, not even looking up to see if help was available. Daniel was already walking toward her. "Hang on," he said. "I've got the door." "I don't need the door," she said without looking at him. "I need my chair to stop sounding like a garbage disposal." He almost smiled at that. He held the door anyway and stepped back, giving the chair room to clear the threshold. It made it barely and rolled into the dry warmth of the shop with a sound like a wounded animal settling down. She stopped just inside the bay, let out a breath through her nose, and finally looked at him. She was probably 40, give or take. Sharp features, dark eyes that assessed him in about 2 seconds flat, the kind of eyes that were used to reading rooms and making decisions. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a silk blouse, business clothes, expensive ones, now rain-darkened and wrinkled. She wore them like armor that had taken some hits. "Daniel Carter," she said. "Yeah." "My assistant called ahead, Victoria Langston." He nodded. The name rang a distant bell, something he'd seen in the Millbrook Gazette. CEO of something. Tech adjacent, if he was remembering right. He'd glanced at the article the way you glance at things that don't belong to your world. "She said the chair started making noise about a week ago," he said, already moving to crouch beside it, his eyes going to the right rear wheel assembly. "And pulling left," Victoria confirmed. "Especially on inclines. My building has a ramp with a 7-degree grade, and last Thursday I nearly ended up in the lobby fountain." "Did you?" "I did not. I have excellent spatial awareness." He looked up at her briefly. She wasn't smiling, but there was something at the corner of her mouth that might have been trying to be. "How long have you had this chair?" 3 years. "You keep up with the maintenance schedule." A pause. "Define keep up with." Daniel looked back at the wheel assembly. "When was the last time you had the drive motors serviced?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I see," he said, not unkindly. "I'm busy," Victoria said, and her voice had a slight edge to it that he recognized, not anger exactly, but the defensive reflex of someone who knew they'd let something slide and didn't want to be lectured about it. "I'm not judging," he said. "I'm just figuring out what we're dealing with." He went to the workbench and grabbed a diagnostic tool, the handheld one he used for chair electronics. He'd serviced maybe a dozen chairs over the years, not his primary business, but Millbrook didn't have a dedicated mobility equipment shop, and he'd learned enough to handle most issues. "You mind if I take a look underneath?" he asked. "Would I be here if I minded?" He crouched again and ran the scanner. The readout came back in 30 seconds. He studied it for a moment, then stood slowly. "What?" Victoria said. She was watching his face. "It's not just the one motor," he said. "Your right rear drive motor's failing, that's the noise and the pull. But your left front caster bearing is also worn past the service limit, and your battery pack's showing degradation. It's down to about 63% of original capacity." She was quiet. "Fixing just the one motor won't hold," he continued. "You'd be back in a month with the same problem on the other side, if you want it done right." "How much?" He ran it in his head. Parts, labor, battery replacement. He didn't like the number. "Full repair parts and labor probably around 2,800, he said. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "That's fine," she said. "How long?" "If I can get the parts overnighted, I can have it back to you day after tomorrow. You have a backup chair." "I have a manual. I hate it." 2 days, he said. "I'll make it 2 days." She nodded once, a firm businesslike nod. Then she glanced around the shop at the truck, up on the lift at the tools racked neatly on the pegboard at the crack in the concrete floor where he'd slammed the wrench earlier that he hadn't gotten around to feeling ashamed of yet. "You work alone?" she asked. "My mechanic moved to Columbus in June. Haven't replaced him yet. Why not? Complicated answer. I have time, she said. My driver isn't coming back for 2 hours. Daniel looked at her for a moment. Then he pulled over one of the shop stools and sat down, because his back had been arguing with him since noon, and he hadn't listened to it yet. Money, he said simply. Cash flow's been tight. New shop opened up on Route 9 took some of my regulars. I've been managing solo because hiring somebody means committing to a payroll I'm not sure I can sustain. Victoria was quiet for a moment, watching him with those assessing eyes. You said complicated, she said. That was actually pretty simple. I left out the part about the $47,000 medical bill I got today, he said. And then he stopped, surprised at himself, because he hadn't meant to say that. He hadn't meant to say that to anyone, not his sister, not his accountant, not the guys he had beers with twice a month who thought everything was fine. Victoria didn't react with pity, which he appreciated. She just said, medical. My daughter. Appendix. She's okay now, she's... He stopped, pressed his lips together. She's good. She drew me a picture, put it on the fridge. Something moved across Victoria's face. Quick, almost imperceptible, but there. How old? She asked. 8. And her mother? He held her gaze. She passed, 3 years ago. The shop was quiet except for the rain. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and it didn't sound like the thing people said because they didn't know what else to say. It sounded like she meant it. Thank you, he said. A moment passed between them, that particular kind of silence that sometimes settles between two strangers when something real has been said. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Do you ever... She stopped, looked down at her hands, then back up. Do you ever get tired of people assuming you're fine? He looked at her carefully. Yeah, he said. Every day. She nodded slowly. People look at me, she said, and they see the title. CEO. Board member. They read the magazine profiles. 30 under 30. Business Innovator of the Year. They think... She paused. They think that because I've built something I must be okay. That I must have figured out how to be okay with... She stopped again. With the chair, he asked quietly. She didn't flinch. With needing things, she said. With needing people. With not being a breath. With not being enough on my own. Daniel was quiet, turning a socket wrench over in his hands, the way he did when he was thinking. You know what I've figured out, he said. After Sarah died, after I was left with Emma and this place, and nothing that looked like a plan, I figured out that the people who look the most like they have it together are usually the ones who got good at hiding how hard they're working just to stay upright. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. That's a very specific insight, she said. I've had 3 years to develop it. Something in her expression shifted. Not softened exactly, more like a door that had been closed, swung open an inch. I fell getting out of a car last year, she said. In a parking garage. No one was around. I was on the ground for about 4 minutes before I could get myself back up. She said it flatly, like a fact, but her jaw was tight. 4 minutes doesn't sound like a long time. It's a long time, Daniel said. It felt like an hour. She looked away. I didn't tell anyone. I got back in the car and drove to my meeting and gave a presentation to 32 people, and I was... She exhaled. I was fine. I was completely fine. Were you... She looked back at him. No. He didn't say anything. Sometimes the right thing was to not say anything. I never ask for help, Victoria said. I should probably work on that. I never let myself fall apart, Daniel said. I should probably work on that. She almost smiled at that. It wasn't a full smile. It was the kind that starts at the eyes and stops just short of the mouth, like it's been a while since smiling felt like something you were allowed to do. Your daughter, Victoria said. Does she know about the bill? God, no. She's 8. She's worried about whether her teacher is going to let them have a Halloween party. Good. Victoria's voice was firm. She should be worried about that. That's what 8 is for. Daniel looked at her. You sound like you know kids. I don't, she said. I just remember what it was like to be one, and to find out too young that the adults in your world were holding things together with Scotch tape. She glanced away for a moment. My father was sick for most of my childhood. He hid it. He thought he was protecting us. Was he? A pause. I don't know. Maybe. But I would have. She stopped. I would have wanted to know. I would have wanted to help. Even at 8. Daniel was quiet, thinking about Emma and the sunflower magnet and the picture of the two of them holding hands. She knows things aren't easy, he said finally. She's smart. Kids always know more than you think. He rubbed the back of his neck. I just don't want her spending her childhood worrying about me. Then let someone else do that for a while, Victoria said. He blinked. It was such a direct thing to say, such an unguarded thing from someone who seemed like she had every guard in place. She seemed to realize it too. She straightened slightly in the chair, pulled back behind her composure. I just mean you don't have to handle everything alone, she said, more measured now. There are options. Financial assistance programs, hospital billing advocates. Half those bills are negotiable, you know. I know, he said. I'll look into it. You should, she said. You should actually do it, not just say you will. He looked at her. Are you always like this? Like what? Direct? Yes, she said without apology. It saves time. He found himself unexpectedly almost laughing. Not the polite kind of almost laugh. The real kind. The kind that came from somewhere in the chest that he hadn't accessed in a while. He caught it before it got all the way out, the habit of containment too strong, but she noticed. You should do that more, she said. Do what? Almost laugh. It looks good on you. And now it was his turn to look away. He stood and walked back to her wheelchair, crouched beside it again. He needed something to do with his hands. That was the thing about his hands, they always knew what to do, even when the rest of him didn't. I'm going to write up the work order, he said. Get those parts ordered tonight. If I can get priority shipping. Money's not an issue on my end, she said. Get the best parts, not the cheapest. I always get the best parts, he said. Doesn't matter what I'm working on. She was quiet for a moment. Then quietly, I believe you. He stood and went to the desk to write up the order. The rain was still falling outside. The shop was warm. He kept the space heaters on through October, and the light was the warm yellow of fluorescence that had been on all day, the color of working late. Victoria sat in the waiting area, in her manual chair she'd transferred without asking for help, and without making it look like an event, and he noticed that she'd taken her phone out but wasn't looking at it. She was looking at the crack in the floor where he'd slammed the wrench. What happened there? She asked. He followed her gaze. Nothing, he said. She looked at him. The bill, he admitted. When I read it. She nodded, said nothing. He went back to the work order. He could feel her watching him, not intrusively. It wasn't that kind of watching. It was more like the way you look at someone when you recognize something in them that you didn't expect to find. He'd felt it too. That was the thing that unsettled him most later when she was gone, and he was locking up the shop and standing in the rain for a moment, because sometimes you needed the cold to think clearly. Not the conversation. Not the things she'd said, or the things he'd said, things he'd never said out loud to anyone. What unsettled him was how easy it had been. How completely unexpectedly easy. Like something that was supposed to be hard, something he'd assumed would always be hard, had just for an hour in a rain-soaked auto shop at the edge of Millbrook, Ohio, felt simple. He stood in the rain a little longer than he needed to. Then he went back inside and ordered the parts. Priority shipping, the best ones they had. The parts arrived the next morning at 10:47. Daniel had been at the shop since 6, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that he'd actually slept more than 3 hours at a stretch, which hadn't happened on a weeknight in longer than he could remember. He'd woken up thinking about the conversation, turning pieces of it over in his mind, the way you turn over something you found in the dirt, not sure yet whether it's valuable or just a rock. He'd told her about the bill. He still couldn't account for that. He told almost no one anything that mattered, not because he was a private man by nature, but because somewhere in the last 3 years the habit of carrying things alone had calcified into something that felt almost structural, like if he put it down, he might not know how to stand. And yet it had come out of him like it was nothing. Like the shop was a confessional, and she was someone he'd known for years, instead of someone who'd rolled in out of the rain. He unpacked the parts carefully, laid them out on the workbench in the order he'd need them, and got to work. Emma had been at school since 7:30, dropped off by his sister Patrice, who lived 20 minutes away and had been the scaffolding holding their small family upright since Sarah died. Patrice never made him feel like a burden. She also never let him pretend he wasn't struggling, which was both the thing he appreciated most about her and the thing that occasionally made him want to move to another state. She'd called at 8 that morning while he was opening the shop. "You look tired," she said, which was impossible since she was on the phone and not video. "I'm always tired," he said. "It's my natural state." "Emma said you were up late." "I had work." "Daniel." "Patrice." A pause. She had a gift for pauses that said more than most people's full sentences. "I'm fine," he said. "A woman called the shop yesterday. Asked if you had experience with power wheelchair repair. I assume she showed up." "She did." And I'm fixing her chair." Another pause. A different kind. "What?" he said. "Nothing." Patrice said, in the tone of voice that meant the opposite of nothing. "Say what you're thinking." "I'm not thinking anything." "Patrice." "I just think it's nice that you talk to someone," she said carefully. "That's all." "I talk to people all the time," he said. "I talked to Kevin Marsh yesterday about his alternator for 45 minutes. That's different and you know it." He didn't answer that. She started, then stopped. "Just don't close off the minute things start to feel unfamiliar. Okay? You do that. You get comfortable with a certain level of alone, and then anything outside it feels wrong." "I'll call you tonight," he said. "Daniel. Thank you for taking Emma. I'll call you tonight." He'd hung up and stood for a moment in the quiet of the shop before the day got moving, holding the phone, thinking about what Patrice had said. Comfortable with a certain level of alone. It was an accurate thing to say about him, the way Patrice's accurate things often stung slightly, like antiseptic. Now 2 hours into the repair, he had the drive motor housing off and the old motor extracted sitting on the bench beside the new one. He worked methodically the way he did everything, not rushed, not slow. Precise. His hands always knew this language better than any other. He was torquing down the new motor mounting bolts when his phone buzzed on the workbench. An unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then some instinct made him answer. "Carter's Auto," he said. "It's Victoria Langston." Her voice was crisp, professional, the voice of a woman who opened every phone call like it was a meeting. "I wanted to check on the timeline. Parts came in this morning," he said. "I'm into the motor swap now. Battery pack goes in this afternoon. I should be done by end of day tomorrow, maybe earlier." "Earlier would be better," she said. "I have a board meeting tomorrow afternoon and I'd rather not." She stopped. "Rather not show up in the manual," he guessed. A pause. "I function fine in the manual," she said, and there was that edge again, the defensive reflex. "I know you do," he said simply. "I just meant it's your chair. You should have it." The edge softened slightly. "Yes," she said. "Exactly." He set down the torque wrench and picked up the phone properly, stepping back from the work. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "The board meeting," he said. "Is there anyone there who knows about the chair maintenance issue, that it's been—" "No," she said quickly, flatly. Okay. No one needs to know that. Victoria, he said, and using her name without a title felt strange in his mouth for just a half second, and then it didn't. I'm not asking because I'm going to tell anyone. I'm asking because you said last night that you never ask for help, and I'm wondering if that's also true at work. A very long pause. That's a complicated question for a Tuesday morning, she said finally. I tend to get complicated before noon, he said. It's a gift. She made a sound that was almost a laugh, barely, a breath with a shape to it. At work, she said carefully, I've spent a decade building a credibility that exists in spite of the chair. Not because people are cruel, most of them aren't. Most of them try, but because there's always this assumption underneath everything that I'm working at a disadvantage, that I'm succeeding despite something, and I refuse. Her voice tightened. I refuse to give anyone a reason to look at me and think I can't manage my own. She stopped. Your own what? He said. Everything, she said, and it came out quieter than she'd intended he could tell. A word that had slipped past the gate. He was quiet for a moment. I get that, he said. Not the same way, not the same thing. But after Sarah died, there were people who looked at me like I was a problem to be managed, like I was a sad story. And I couldn't. I just couldn't let that be who I was. So I closed everything off and told everyone I was fine and just kept working. Did it help? She asked. Not even a little, he said. But it got me through. Yes, she said quietly. That's exactly it. It gets you through. He picked up a rag and wiped his hands, though they didn't need it, just something to do. For what it's worth, he said. From the outside, the chair has nothing to do with the impression you make. Last night you walked. He caught himself. You came in soaking wet at the end of what was probably a 14-hour day, and you were still sharper than anyone I've talked to in months. Another silence. This one felt different. Heavier, like she was turning something over. That's a kind thing to say, she said finally, and her voice had lost its professional coating for just a moment, just a layer enough that he could hear the real texture of it underneath. I'm not kind, he said. I'm just accurate. Now you sound like me, she said. God forbid, he said. This time she actually laughed. Short, surprised, real, the laugh of someone who hadn't expected to and didn't quite know what to do with it once it happened. It transformed her voice completely, turned it into something warmer and younger and less defended. He found himself smiling at the wall of the shop, which was something he hadn't done in a while. I should let you get back to it, she said, composure sliding back into place. But not all the way. There was still a crack in it, and he could hear that she knew it. I'll call you when it's ready, he said. Probably tomorrow morning. Thank you, Daniel. He noticed she used his name. He noticed it and didn't say anything about it, just held it for a second, before the call ended. He stood in the shop for a moment after hanging up. The fluorescents hummed. Outside, the day had turned clear after last night's rain, and the light that came through the bay windows was the gold October kind that felt like it was already practicing for goodbye. He went back to the wheelchair. He worked through the lunch he didn't eat, and the afternoon that moved, the way afternoons, in the shop, always moved steadily, project by project, problem by problem. The motor swap was clean. The bearing replacement on the left front caster took longer than expected because the previous installer had over-tightened the retaining bolt and he had to work carefully to avoid stripping the thread. He was patient with it. Patience was the one resource he'd never run out of, maybe because everything else had been in such short supply that patience had evolved by necessity into a survival skill. He was testing the bearing when the shop door opened. Not a customer, it was Kevin Marsh, 53 years old, retired from the county public works, and the closest thing Daniel had to a regular friend. Kevin came in every 2 or 3 weeks for something, and about half the time, the something was just an excuse. Heard you had an exciting Tuesday, Kevin said, dropping into one of the plastic waiting chairs with the ease of a man who'd been sitting in those chairs for years. Daniel looked at him without stopping work. "Where'd you hear that?" "Linda Foss works at Langston Technologies," Kevin said. "Word travels. Word that what I fixed someone's chair. Word that Victoria Langston spent 2 hours in your shop and left looking—" Kevin tilted his head. Linda said different. Her word. Daniel said nothing, which Kevin read with the accuracy of long familiarity. "I'm not saying anything," Kevin said. "You're saying plenty," Daniel said. "You're just not using full sentences." "She's a serious woman," Kevin said. "Smart. I saw her speak at the chamber thing last year. She's—" He seemed to search for the word. "Formidable. That's the word." "She is," Daniel said. "You talked to her long?" "A while." He kept his eyes on the work. "She's going through some things." "Aren't we all?" Kevin said. "Yeah, but some people are going through them loudly, and some people are going through them so quietly that no one notices until the chair breaks," Daniel said. And then he stopped because that had come out more personally than he'd intended, and Kevin was the kind of man who noticed things. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Then, "You doing okay, Dan?" "Fine." "Because you told me you were fine 3 months ago when the business at Route 9 opened, and I know what that particular fine of yours sounds like." Daniel set down the bearing tool and turned to look at his friend. "I got a medical bill yesterday," he said. "Emma's surgery." Kevin's expression shifted. "How much?" 47. Kevin let out a low sound. Not quite a whistle. "Dan." "I'll figure it out." "You always say that." "And I always do." "That doesn't mean you have to do it alone every single time," Kevin said. There it was again. That word. Alone. Everyone was saying it to him today like the universe had coordinated. "Victoria said something like that," Daniel said almost without meaning to. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "First name." "That's her name." "Sure it is." Kevin leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Listen, I know a guy at Millbrook General, works in billing. He's helped a couple people I know get those numbers way, way down. Hospital bills at that level, there's usually room. They don't always tell you that up front." Daniel looked at him. "Who?" "Guy named Sal Petrocelli. He's not advertising it, but if you tell him I sent you—" Kevin shrugged. "Just call him. Promise me." Daniel held his gaze for a moment. Then he exhaled a long, slow exhale that felt like setting something down. "Yeah," he said. "Okay, I'll call." "Today," Kevin said. "Today." Kevin leaned back, satisfied. "Good." He stood up, the conversation closed in his manner. Kevin never oversold a moment. He moved to the door. "Place looks good, by the way. You should get that crack in the floor fixed, though." "Working on it," Daniel said. Kevin left, and Daniel stood in the echo of the shop for a moment, thinking about the fact that 2 different people, Kevin and Victoria, both had told him the same essential thing in the same 12 hours. That you didn't have to hold it all alone. He wasn't sure he knew how to do anything else. But he was maybe for the first time willing to admit that was a limitation and not a virtue. He picked up his phone and Googled Sal Petrocelli at Millbrook General. Found the department extension. Dialed before he could talk himself out of it. The call took 22 minutes. At the end of it, Sal Petrocelli had explained 3 financial assistance programs Daniel likely qualified for, a charity care application that could reduce the bill by 60% or more, and a payment plan option with 0 interest that the billing department offered but didn't put in the statement. 47,000 had a real chance of becoming somewhere around 8,000 spread over 2 years. Daniel sat in the desk chair after he hung up and didn't move for a while. The relief was physical. It moved through him like the first warm breath after coming in from the cold. And he hadn't known until that moment how completely the number had been sitting on his chest like something with weight. He called Kevin back. "That fast," Kevin said. "That fast," Daniel said. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, thank Sal. I'm thanking you." A pause. "You're welcome, Dan," Kevin said quietly. He got back to the wheelchair. It was good work, detailed, satisfying work, the kind that required enough focus to crowd out everything else, and he was grateful for it. By 4 o'clock he had the motor installed and running clean, the caster bearing seated and rolling true, and the battery pack wired in and charging. He ran a system diagnostic. The software came back clean. He test drove the chair slowly across the bay floor, straight line, no pull, no whine. Just the smooth, even hum of a drive system running the way it was designed to. He let himself feel good about it. He was writing up the final service notes when his phone buzzed again. Victoria, this time not unknown. He'd saved the number that morning without thinking about it much. "How's it looking?" she asked before he could speak. "Done," he said. A pause. Done. Or, I'm being optimistic. Done. Done, he said. Motor's clean. Caster's perfect, batteries at full charge. I ran the diagnostic. It's all green. He heard her exhale. He heard her. Not the controlled professional exhale she probably used in meetings. A real one, the kind that carried something behind it. "You said tomorrow," she said. "I know." "How?" "I didn't eat lunch," he said. A silence. And then, "Daniel, you should eat lunch." "Probably," he said. "You can pick it up whenever. Tonight if you want." "My driver can come at 6, she said. "I'll be here." Another silence, but not the empty kind. The kind that had something moving through it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask," he said, using her words back to her. A brief pause, she caught it. "Last night," she said carefully, "you mentioned your daughter. The picture on the refrigerator." "Yeah." Are you doing okay with the bill situation?" He paused. Then he told her about Kevin, about Sal Petrocelli, about the 47,000 that maybe wasn't going to be 47,000. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad," she said. "Me too," he said. "I should have asked sooner. I don't usually." "Ask," she finished. "Yeah." "I know," she said. The simplicity of it. I know 2 words from someone who genuinely did know, because she carried the same habit in a different shape, hid him somewhere quiet. 6 o'clock, he said. 6 o'clock, she confirmed. After they hung up, he sat at the desk for a moment, not doing anything in particular, just sitting. Outside, the October light was going gold and low, stretching across the shop floor, in long, warm bars, the kind that showed the dust motes floating in the air, all that invisible movement that was always happening, even when everything seemed still. He thought about what Patrice had said that morning, comfortable with a certain level of alone. He'd been living in that comfort for 3 years, and it had served its purpose. It had kept him functional. It had kept Emma fed and clothed, and in a school she liked with a teacher she loved who might or might not give them a Halloween party. It had kept the shop open and the lights on and the mortgage paid. But somewhere in the last 24 hours, in a conversation that started with a broken wheelchair and a medical bill and a woman who came in from the rain and didn't ask for help, somewhere in all of that, the walls of that particular comfort had gotten a crack in them. Not a break, not anything dramatic, just a crack. The kind that lets in light. He locked up the wheelchair, carefully, full charge brakes set, and went to call Emma before she got home from school, because she'd asked him that morning to remember to call, and he'd promised, and whatever else might be complicated or uncertain or impossible to predict, a promise to his daughter was something he always kept. The phone rang twice. Emma picked up on the second ring. "Dad," she said, breathless the way she always was right after school. "You remembered." "I always remember," he said. "You forgot last Thursday," she said without accusation, just as a point of fact. "I apologized for last Thursday." "You did," she agreed. "You brought ice cream. Considerate even," he said. She laughed. Emma's laugh, the one that sounded like Sarah's, and broke his heart every single time in a way he had made peace with mostly. "Aunt Patrice said you talked to someone important yesterday," she said. Aunt Patrice talks a lot, he said. Was it a customer? Yes. Was she nice? He thought about that for a second. About the jaw set tight coming up the ramp. About the woman who spent 4 minutes on the floor of a parking garage and got up and gave a presentation to 32 people and told no one. About the laugh that sounded like it surprised her when it came out. Yeah, he said. She was nice. Is she coming back? Emma asked. Tonight, he said. To pick up her chair. Oh. A pause, and he could hear her processing this with 8-year-old logic. Are you going to be nervous? Why would I be nervous? He said. I don't know, Emma said. You got that voice. What voice? The voice you got when you had to call the school about my costume for the pageant, like you're trying to sound normal, but it's a little too normal. He opened his mouth, closed it. His 8-year-old daughter had just accurately diagnosed him in real time. Go do your homework, he said. She laughed again and hung up, and he sat holding the phone long after the call ended, smiling at the wall of the shop. The same wall, same smile, second time that day. Something that simple. Something he'd almost forgotten was available to him. He got up, squared the workbench, checked the wheelchair one more time. Everything clean, everything right. He put a fresh pot of coffee on the machine, was having a good day, and settled in to wait for 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock came and went. Daniel refilled his coffee at 6:10, checked his phone at 6:15, and told himself it didn't mean anything at 6:20. People ran late. People in Victoria Langston's position probably ran late as a matter of professional necessity, the kind of schedule that didn't leave room for anything to go exactly as planned. He went back to the F-150 he'd been neglecting for 2 days and got under it with a flashlight because the alternative was standing around watching the door, and he wasn't going to do that. He heard the car at 6:34. Not her driver, it was a different sound than he expected. Not the quiet pull of a car service vehicle. This was a BMW from the engine note. It stopped outside, and he heard the door, and then the particular soft mechanical hum of the chair lift on the side of the vehicle deploying, and he lay under the truck and listened to it, and did not come out immediately, because he wanted to give her the space of arriving without an audience. He heard the lift settle. Heard the hum of the manual chair she'd transferred into it for the ride over, or more likely hadn't bothered swapping back to the power chair at all after leaving the shop last night. He heard the chair's small rubber wheels on the concrete outside, heard her hit the button for the door he'd left propped open at 5:50 without quite admitting to himself why. Then she was inside. You're under a truck, she said. Observant, he said from under the truck. Is that where you live now? Some days it feels that way. He rolled out on the creeper, stood and wiped his hands. She was in the manual chair, still in work clothes, a different blazer today. Navy still expensive, still armor. She looked like she'd had a long day and wasn't going to admit it. You're late, he said. I know, she said. Board meeting ran over. How'd it go? She tilted her head slightly, like the question surprised her. Fine. We resolved a disagreement about the Q4 capital allocation. I was right, which took longer to establish than it should have. Does it always take that long? When the other party is Gerald Whitmore, yes, she said. Gerald has strong opinions and weak data. It's a difficult combination. She looked past him toward the back of the shop where her power chair was sitting charged and ready. Is that it? All finished, he said. You want to test it before I close out the order? She was already moving toward it. He stepped back, giving her room. He watched her pull alongside the power chair, set the brake on the manual, and transfer the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no invitation for comment. She settled into the power chair and powered it on. The system chimed softly. She drove it in a slow circle around the open floor of the bay, and he watched her face, not the chair. He saw it the moment she felt the difference. It was small, a slight release in her shoulders, barely perceptible, the way you exhale when you sit down in something that finally fits right. The pull is gone, she said. It's gone, he confirmed. She drove it forward, then reversed, then turned in a tight circle, testing it the way he'd tested it, looking for anything off. There was nothing off. He'd made sure of that. "It's quiet," she said. "New motor," he said. "It'll be even quieter once it breaks in another 100 hours or so." She stopped in the center of the bay and looked at him. "It feels like a different chair," she said. "It's the same chair," he said. "It just feels the way it was supposed to feel when you got it." She was quiet for a moment, looking down at her hands on the armrests. "I forgot," she said quietly. "I forgot it was supposed to feel like this." He didn't say anything to that, because there wasn't anything to say to it that wouldn't diminish it. He just nodded and went to the desk to pull up the work order. He ran through the service notes with her new right rear drive motor, left front caster, bearing replacement full battery pack, replacement system, diagnostic drive, calibration, and read off the final number. She handed him a card without looking at it, the way people did when money wasn't the part of the transaction they were thinking about. "The battery," she said while he ran the card. "How long will it last?" "Good 3 to 4 years if you stay on the maintenance schedule," he said. "I can set you up with a reminder system. Just an email, nothing complicated. Flags you 6 weeks before each service interval." "You do that for customers." "I do it for customers who'll actually need to be reminded," he said. She looked at him. The edge of her mouth moved. "Are you implying I have a history of neglecting service schedules?" "I'm implying nothing," he said. "I'm directly stating it." The laugh came again, that short, surprised sound, the one that seemed to catch her off guard every time. He was starting to recognize it, starting to understand that it meant she'd dropped her guard for just a second, and that it didn't happen often. He handed back the card and the receipt. She folded the receipt without looking at it and tucked it into her jacket pocket. And then neither of them moved toward the door. The shop was quiet. The F-150 sat half-finished on the lift. The coffee machine was still on. He could smell it from the desk. Outside the bay windows, Millbrook was settling into its Tuesday evening, a few cars passing on the main road, the sky the deep blue of 7 o'clock in October. "You called the hospital," she said. Not a question. He looked at her. "Kevin told you." "Kevin Marsh is on the Langston Technologies Community Advisory Board," she said. "Small world. He mentioned it, not details, just that you'd made the call. He seemed pleased." "He was annoyingly smug about it," Daniel agreed. "How did it go?" He told her about Sal Petrocelli the same way he'd told her on the phone that afternoon, but slower now with the actual numbers. The 60% reduction, the zero-interest payment plan, the way $47,000 had become something he might actually be able to see the other side of. Victoria listened without interrupting, which he'd noticed was something she did. She actually listened, the way people rarely did without preparing her next sentence while you were still talking. "I'm glad," she said again when he finished. The same 2 words as on the phone, the same quiet delivery. "You said that already," he pointed out. "I know. I meant it both times." He leaned back against the workbench. "You knew about those programs," he said. "When you told me the bills were negotiable, you already knew." She held his gaze. "I sit on the board of a hospital foundation," she said. "Yes. I know how the system works, and what hospitals don't advertise." "You could have just told me the specifics." "You wouldn't have called if I had," she said. He started to argue that, and then stopped because she was right. He wouldn't have. He would have thanked her politely and carried the $47,000 on his own, because it had come from a stranger in a single conversation, and his pride would have found a way to set it aside. "You knew that," he said. "I know the type," she said. "Because I'm the type." He nodded slowly. "You're a strategist," he said. "I'm a strategist." She agreed without apology. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition that was more complicated than he had words for. They were the same broken thing in different shapes, both of them, and they had both spent years making the breakage look like architecture. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You keep asking if you can ask," she said. "You can always ask." "Your family," he said. You mentioned your father was sick when you were growing up. Is he? He died when I was 22, she said. It came out flat, practiced the tone of someone who had said a fact so many times it had worn smooth. Heart failure, complications from the illness he hid from us for the last 4 years of his life. She paused. My mother is in Phoenix. We're close in our way. She doesn't fully understand my work, but she calls every Sunday, and she sends birthday cards to arrive exactly on the day, not a day early or late. She's precise about it. It's her love language. That's a nice detail, he said. She's a nice woman, Victoria said. Better than she got, honestly. She deserved an easier life than she had. He heard something in that, something old and layered. Do you think about that? He said. Easier lives, what yours would have looked like differently. She considered this seriously, the way she seemed to consider everything. My disability is congenital, she said. It's always been what it is. So there's no before and after to compare. There's no parallel life I can imagine where I'm walking around and everything is simpler. This is just life. It's the only one I have. She tilted her head slightly. But the question I do think about sometimes is whether I've made it harder than it had to be. By refusing things. By keeping people at a distance so they couldn't feel sorry for me. A pause. By letting the chair go 3 years without a service because walking into a repair shop felt like admitting something I didn't want to admit. Which was, he said. She looked at him steadily. That I need things, she said. Same answer as last night. It keeps being the same answer. Because it's the true one, he said. Yes, she said. Because it's the true one. He was quiet for a moment, turning his wedding ring, the habit he still had, the one he couldn't break, touching the band on his left hand when he was thinking hard about something. He'd thought about taking it off 100 times and never had. Victoria's eyes went to his hand. He saw her notice. You still wear it, she said. Yeah. Is that? She stopped. You can ask, he said, giving it back to her. She met his eyes. Is it because you're not ready, or because you don't know what ready would feel like? He thought about that. Really thought about it, didn't give the automatic answer. Both, he said. And because Emma sees it, and I don't know what it means to her that it's there, whether it's a comfort or a... He stopped. I haven't asked her. You should ask her, Victoria said. I know. He looked down at the ring. She's 8. I don't know how to have that conversation with an 8-year-old. You don't have to explain it, Victoria said. You just have to ask her how she feels about it. Kids can answer that. They just can't handle the explanation. He looked up at her. You're very good at that, he said. At what? Knowing what to say. He paused. Knowing the right sentence. It's my job, she said. I run a company. I say the right sentence or things fall apart. But then she looked away and her voice shifted slightly. Or I used to be good at it. Lately I think I've been saying the right sentences to rooms full of people and coming home and not saying anything at all to... She stopped. To who? He said quietly. She pressed her lips together for a moment. To anyone, she said. There's no one specific. That's the... A brief exhale. That's the actual problem if we're being honest. He let the silence hold for a moment. Then, how long has it been like that? Like what? Like coming home to nothing specific. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite name, somewhere between being caught and being relieved at being caught. A while, she said. My last relationship ended 2 years ago. He was good. He was a genuinely good person. But he... She seemed to search for it. He kept looking at me like I was something he could fix, she said. And I could not stand being looked at that way. So eventually, I made it impossible for him to stay. Did you know you were doing it? Daniel asked. Not at the time, she said. In retrospect, completely. I did the same thing after Sarah died, he said. Not relationships, I haven't gotten there, but with friends. With Patrice. I'd let people in to a certain point and then he gestured vaguely. I'd close a door, quietly, and they'd be on the other side of it before they realized. And they still came back, she said. The good ones did, he said. Patrice always knocked. Kevin just walks in like the door isn't there. She smiled at that, a real one this time, not the edge of the mouth almost. A full, slow smile that changed her face entirely, made her look like someone who did it more often in private than she ever let anyone see. I don't have a Kevin, she said. You need a Kevin, he said. Maybe, she said. Or maybe I need to stop making it so difficult to be in my orbit. She looked at her hands again. I've been told I'm intimidating. More than once. More than 10 times. You are intimidating, he said. She looked up. Thank you for the honesty. It's not a criticism, he said. It's just accurate. You walk into a room, you roll into a room, and you take it over without trying. That's not a flaw. But I think you might be using it. Like a perimeter. Her expression stilled. Not defensively, she was taking it in. People don't usually say that to me, she said. I don't have a lot to lose by saying it, he said, and meant it without self-pity. I'm a mechanic in Millbrook, Ohio. I'm not trying to impress you. No, she said. You're really not. And there was something like wonder in her voice, very slight. Like she'd been waiting a long time to talk to someone who wasn't trying to impress her. She looked at him, then fully looked at him, the assessing gaze he'd noticed the first night, but different now. Less professional. More personal. You mentioned Sarah, she said carefully. Last night, and today. But you haven't told me... She paused. You haven't told me what she was like. He went still. It wasn't a question people asked. They asked how she died occasionally. They said they were sorry always. But they didn't ask what she was like because asking that required being willing to hear the answer, to sit with it, to let it be about her and not about the tragedy. His throat moved. She was funny, he said. That's the first thing. People who didn't know her well thought she was quiet. She had this calm about her. But she was the funniest person I ever knew. Dry. She'd let you walk into something and just wait. Wait for you to figure out what she'd done, and then just look at you. Victoria was watching him carefully. She was an elementary school teacher, he said. 3rd grade. She'd come home and tell me about her kids. She always called them her kids, and she knew every single one of them. Not just their names, their fears, what made them feel safe. She could tell in 40 seconds whether a kid had had a bad morning at home, just by the way they hung up their backpack. He stopped. She was paying attention all the time, to everyone. Like Emma, Victoria said quietly. He looked at her surprised. The way you described Emma knowing your voice, she said. That you had a voice. He nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. Exactly like Emma. She sounds extraordinary, Victoria said, and didn't add the things people usually added. The softening qualifications, the subject, changes the pivots toward something lighter. She just let it stand. She was, he said. She was completely... His voice did something, a slight unevenness, and he pressed his mouth together for a moment. She was my whole life, and then she was gone in 7 months, and I've been trying to figure out who I am without her as the center of it. For 3 years I've been working that out. Have you? Victoria said. Have I figured out who you are? He thought about it. Some of it, he said. Emma's father, that one's clear. The shop, the work, this. He spread one hand slightly indicating the bay, the tools, the space. This is still me, maybe more than anything. He paused. The rest of it, I'm still working on. That's honest, she said. You're easier to be honest with than most people, he said. I don't fully understand why. She was quiet for a moment. I think, she said slowly, it's because I don't need anything from you. I'm not in your life. I'm not going to judge you against a history of you I've built up over years. I'm just, she tilted her head. I'm just a woman whose chair you fixed. Is that what you are? He said. She met his eyes. Something moved across her face, something quick and unguarded, like a door swinging open and then catching before it went too far. I don't know, she said very quietly. I haven't entirely figured that out yet either. The shop held that, the hum of the fluorescents, the distant sound of Millbrook outside. Daniel and Victoria in the warm yellow light holding a silence that had turned into something neither of them had planned for. He was the one who moved first, pushing off the workbench, walking to the coffee machine. You want coffee? He said. It's 7 o'clock, she said. Is that a yes or a no? A pause. It's a yes, she said. He poured 2 cups. He didn't own anything that looked like a nice mug. They were the same thick diner-style mugs he'd had for years, white with a small chip on one handle, and he carried them over without apology, because that was who he was, and this was his place. She took the mug with both hands, and he noticed the way she held it like it was something warming, something she actually needed, though she probably would have died before saying so. Can I ask you something? She said. He'd lost count of how many times they'd started sentences that way now. Yeah, he said. When you're done working on something, she said, gesturing at the shop. When you've fixed a thing that was broken and it's running the way it should, how does that feel? He looked at her a little surprised by the question. Like something adding up to 0, he said. In a good way, like a thing was wrong and now it's right, and the world is exactly that much more correct than it was before. She nodded slowly. That's what I feel after a good quarter, she said. Or after I've fixed a broken team dynamic or turned around a failing project. It's the same feeling, like you've imposed a small order on the chaos. Yeah, he said, exactly that. We're not that different, she said. I've been thinking that since last night, he said. She looked at her coffee, then back at him. My driver's waiting, she said. I know. But she didn't move. And he didn't move. And the clock on the wall above the desk moved forward another minute, without either of them acknowledging it, because there was something happening in this space that neither of them wanted to be the one to end. Not because they didn't know how, but because ending it meant going back to the life that existed before it, and that life, good as it was in its broken way, had been lonelier than either of them had been willing to admit. There's a coffee shop, Daniel said. He said it the way you say something when you've thought about it and then said it before you could stop yourself. On Clement Street. They do breakfast too. Emma loves their pancakes. I take her on Saturday mornings sometimes when I don't have early work. Victoria looked at him steadily. I'm not asking, he started. Yes, you are, she said. Not unkindly, precisely. He held her gaze. Yes, he said. I am. She looked at him for a long moment. The fluorescents hummed. Something in the building settled the small tick of metal cooling that old structures made at night. I have an early call Saturday, she said. The coffee shop doesn't open until 8, he said. A silence. What time, she said. 8:30, he said. Emma would... He stopped. Then, she would like meeting you. She'd ask you approximately 40 questions before you finished your first cup. Something moved across Victoria's face. Something that cracked the professional composure completely open for just a second. Something that looked like longing, or like the memory of longing. The kind that appears when you've convinced yourself you don't want a thing, and then someone describes it, and your body knows you're lying. 8:30, she said. 8:30, he confirmed. She finished the coffee, set the mug on the workbench with a small, precise click, powered the chair toward the door, and he walked ahead to open it. Not because she needed him to, and they both knew it, but because it was something to do with the moment, some physical expression of a thing that didn't have words yet. She stopped in the doorway. Daniel, she said. He turned. She looked at him with those dark, direct eyes, and for a moment she looked like she was going to say something specific, something exact and carefully chosen. but instead she just said, "Thank you. For the chair." "That's what I'm here for," he said. She nodded once, drove out into the night. He stood in the open bay door and watched her driver get out and help her load the chair. She accepted the help with a quiet efficiency that looked just slightly less armored than it would have a day ago. Maybe he was imagining it. Maybe not. The BMW pulled out onto the road and he watched the taillights until they turned the corner and were gone. He stood there a moment longer. Then he took his phone out of his pocket and texted Patrice Emma's staying home Saturday morning. "I have somewhere to be at 8:30. Patrice's response came back in 45 seconds, a single emoji. A small yellow face with the widest possible smile. He put the phone away, turned off the bay lights, and went to lock up the shop. He was almost to the door when he stopped, turned back and picked up the chipped mug she'd used from the workbench. He carried both mugs to the back and set them in the sink, left them side by side, went home. He didn't sleep well Friday night, which he hadn't expected. It wasn't anxiety exactly, or it was, but not the grinding practical kind he was used to, the kind that came with unpaid bills and broken equipment, and the particular terror of being the only adult standing between an 8-year-old and everything that could go wrong. This was different. Lighter in a way that somehow made it harder to shake. He lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house settle around him and thought about nothing specific and everything at once, which was its own kind of sleeplessness. He got up at 6, made coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the October morning take shape outside. The yard needed work. The leaves had been coming down for 2 weeks and he hadn't gotten to them yet. He kept meaning to. He'd rake them with Emma one of these weekends, make an afternoon of it the way Sarah used to. She'd loved the fall with a completeness that made other people's seasonal preferences look casual. She'd had a flannel shirt she wore every October until it was so thin you could see light through the elbows. He didn't know why he was thinking about the flannel shirt at 6 in the morning. He finished his coffee and went to knock on Emma's door. She was already awake, had been for a while from the look of it. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed with a book open in her lap, but not actually reading it, which was her posture when she was thinking about something. "Morning," he said. "We're going to the Clement Street place," she said immediately. Not a question. 8:30, he said. "Get dressed." She looked at him with those eyes of hers, Sarah's eyes, the warm brown ones that saw too much. "Is someone meeting us there?" "Yeah," he said. "The woman?" she said. He looked at her. "Aunt Patrice talks too much," he said. "Aunt Patrice didn't say anything," Emma said. "You just got the voice again." He had apparently been walking around for 3 days with a voice he didn't know he had. "Get dressed," he said. "Wear the blue sweater, it's cold." "I know it's cold, Dad. I have a weather app." He left her to it and went to get ready, standing in the bathroom mirror for longer than he usually did, which felt like a kind of admission. He was 44 years old with gray at the temples and oil-stained hands that didn't fully clean, and a face that looked exactly like the life he'd been living: outdoor work and short sleep and 3 years of carrying weight without setting it down. He wasn't a man who spent time wishing he looked different, but he combed his hair with slightly more intention than usual, and he put on the dark green flannel that Patrice had given him last Christmas and said made him look like a human being instead of a mechanic who slept in his truck. He was in the kitchen when Emma came out, blue sweater hair in 2 braids she'd done herself, with the imperfect efficiency of a child who had learned to be self-sufficient, partly by necessity and partly because she was just built that way. "You look nice," she said, studying him. "I look the same as always," he said. "The green flannel is the nice one," she said. "You only wear it for good things." He handed her a piece of toast. "Eat this in the car." She took the toast and her backpack. She brought a book everywhere, a habit she'd inherited whole from her mother, and followed him out without further comment, though she was smiling at her toast in a way that she probably thought he couldn't see. He could see it. He drove. Emma ate her toast and read her book in the passenger seat with the easy comfort of a child who was used to early mornings and moving around. The town slid past outside the windows, Millbrook on a Saturday, quieter and warmer looking than its weekday self. Leaves on the sidewalks, a couple of joggers, the hardware store on 3rd just opening its doors. He'd driven this route 100 times. Today, it felt shorter than it usually did. He pulled into the small lot behind Clement Street Cafe at 8:22 and sat for a moment. "She's already there," Emma said, not looking up from her book. He looked up. Through the cafe window he could see a figure at a corner table, the only corner table large enough to accommodate a wheelchair alongside it. Victoria had angled herself so she could see the door. She was holding a coffee cup in both hands, the same way she'd held the mug in the shop, and she was looking down at the table, not at her phone, just existing in the space without performing for anyone. He watched her for a moment. Something in his chest did something quiet and significant. "She looks nice," Emma said, still reading. "You can see her from here. Corner table. Dark hair. She's in a wheelchair." Emma finally looked up and turned to him with a straightforward patience that was almost comical. "Dad, I have eyes." He unbuckled his seatbelt. "Let's go." Emma was out of the car before him because she moved the way 8-year-olds moved without deliberation, and she held the cafe door open with both hands, and he noticed with a particular precision that the cafe door opened wide and the threshold was flush. No step, and he thought she probably checked before she picked this place. Then they were inside, and Emma was already walking toward the corner table because she'd spotted it, and she didn't hesitate in the way that only very young children and very confident people didn't hesitate. And Victoria looked up from her coffee and saw them. She looked at Emma first. Her expression did something open and unguarded happened across her face just for a second before the composure came back, but not all the way back, not enough to erase it completely. Emma stopped at the table. "Hi," she said. "I'm Emma. My dad says you're very direct." Victoria looked at Daniel over Emma's head. Daniel pressed 2 fingers to his forehead. "He said that," Victoria said. "He said it like it was a good thing." Emma said helpfully. "Did he?" Victoria said. "He is also very direct," Emma said, pulling out a chair. "He just doesn't always start the sentences." Victoria looked at the child with an expression that Daniel could only describe as delighted and slightly disarmed. "You're Emma Carter," she said. "Yes," Emma said, settling into her chair and setting her book on the table. "You're Victoria Langston. You run a tech company. What does it do?" "Emma?" Daniel said. "It's a good question," Victoria said. "It develops adaptive interface technology, software that makes computers and devices easier to use for people with physical or cognitive disabilities." Emma absorbed this. "So, you make things easier for people who have a harder time with regular things." "That's exactly it," Victoria said. "That's important," Emma said seriously. "My teacher says the most important jobs are the ones that make things better for people who get left out." She picked up her menu. "I'm getting the blueberry pancakes. I always get the blueberry pancakes." Daniel sat down. He looked across the table at Victoria, who was looking at Emma with the expression of someone encountering a small, extraordinary force of nature and not entirely sure whether to step back or step toward. "She's a lot," he said quietly. "She's wonderful," Victoria said, equally quiet, without an instant of hesitation. Emma looked up from the menu. "What are you getting?" she asked Victoria. "I haven't decided," Victoria said. "What do you recommend?" And just like that, Emma was off a full and enthusiastic review of the cafe's breakfast options, delivered with the authority of someone who had conducted extensive field research and had firm opinions. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking follow-up questions, and Daniel watched them and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time, and couldn't quite name something that sat in the chest, like warmth, that didn't know where to put itself. The food came. Emma ate with the focused enthusiasm she brought to anything she actually liked, and between bites, she asked Victoria the 40 questions Daniel had predicted. and Victoria answered all of them directly and without condescension, which Emma detected and responded to like a plant turning toward light. She asked what it was like to run a company. She asked how Victoria had learned to do it. She asked if the wheelchair was hard, and Victoria said it wasn't anymore, and Emma said good and went back to her pancakes with the uncomplicated acceptance that children could sometimes manage that adults worked for years to reach. At some point, Emma asked to be excused to look at the bookshelf at the back of the cafe. It was that kind of place, books on a shelf for browsing, and Daniel said yes, and then they were alone at the table, which felt both sudden and inevitable. Victoria was quiet for a moment, her coffee cup moving slightly in her hands. "She's exactly what you said she was," she said. "Which part?" "All of it," Victoria said. "Smart? Pays attention." She paused. "She loves you so much it's in everything she says." He looked down at the table. "Yeah. She mentioned Sarah," Victoria said carefully. "She said, 'My mom used to love this place.' Casually, just like that." He nodded slowly. "She does that. She just puts her in sentences, like she's still around. I used to worry about whether that was healthy, and then her school counselor told me it was one of the healthiest things she could do, and to just let her." "The counselor was right," Victoria said. "Do you—" He stopped. "What?" she said. "Do you ever—" He chose his words. "Do you ever think about what your life looks like from the outside? Like you step back and you see it the way a stranger would?" She considered this. "Sometimes," she said. "Usually at 4 in the morning when I can't sleep." "I do that," he said. "And when I do it, I see. I see the shop and Emma and Patrice and Kevin and the house that needs the gutters cleaned, and I think it's a good life. It's a genuinely good life. But there's a shape missing from it, and I got so used to that shape being missing that I stopped noticing it. Like when you've had a noise in the house so long, you don't hear it anymore." Victoria was looking at him with an expression he recognized now, the one that meant she was taking something in at full depth, not partially, not behind glass. "And then something changes," he said, "and suddenly you hear it again." She didn't say anything for a moment. "I drove home Tuesday night," she said, "and I sat in my car in the building garage for 12 minutes before going upstairs. My driver asked if I was okay, and I said yes." She paused. "I was thinking about the conversation. I kept—" She stopped. "I kept turning it over, and I couldn't figure out why it stayed with me the way it did. I don't—" She exhaled. "I don't usually let conversations stay with me. I move through them, and I retain what's useful, and I file the rest." "And this one refused to file," she said. He held her gaze. "For what it's worth," he said. "Same." She looked at her coffee, then at him. "I haven't sat across a table from someone in a long time," she said, and felt like they were actually seeing me. "Not the CEO," he said. "Not the chair," she said. He shook his head slowly. "I see both," he said. "The CEO is real. The chair is real. I'm just also seeing—" He paused. "The person who held a parking garage floor for 4 minutes and got up and gave a presentation. The person who sends birthday cards and calls her mother every Sunday because she gets it. The person who came into my shop and drank coffee from a chipped mug at 7 o'clock at night and didn't leave when she probably should have." She blinked very slowly. Something moved across her face that was different from all the things he'd seen move across it before, more undefended than the laugh, more still than the smile. Something like being recognized. "I should have left at 6:30, she said. "My driver billed an extra hour." "Worth it," he said. She looked at him steadily. "Yes," she said. "Completely." Emma came back then, carrying 2 books she'd found on the shelf, and wanted to show Victoria, and the moment shifted into something warmer and lighter, the 3 of them at a corner table with the Saturday morning moving around them. At some point, Daniel looked up and realized 45 minutes had passed, and he hadn't checked his phone once. When they finally stood to go, Emma first already wearing her coat, already asking if they could come back next week. Victoria reached for her wallet, and Daniel put his hand out slightly, not stopping her, but close to it, the gesture of a man who'd been raised a certain way and couldn't quite unraise himself. "I've got it," he said. She looked at his hand, then at him. Then she put her wallet back. "Thank you," she said, and it was the same tone as when she'd said it about the chair, not social reflex, but something genuine, something that acknowledged more than the transaction. He paid. He went to help Emma with her zipper which had stuck, and behind him he heard Victoria say something quietly to the server, something he couldn't make out, and when he turned back, she was looking at her phone with a neutral expression, and he didn't ask. They walked out together into the October morning, the three of them. Emma immediately went to examine a dog on a leash outside the bakery 2 doors down, which was her standard detour on this block. Daniel and Victoria stopped on the sidewalk. Her driver was waiting at the curb. She'd texted him apparently from the table. She looked at Daniel. "I have to drive to Columbus on Wednesday," she said. "Board strategy session. I'll be back Thursday." "Okay," he said. "There's a place near the office there," she said in the tone of someone who has made a decision and is delivering it precisely because that was how she did everything. "Good coffee. Better than good. It's on the ground floor of the Marchetti building on 5th. I go there when I'm in the city." She paused. "I don't know why I'm telling you that." He thought about that for a second. "Maybe because you want someone to know where you are," he said gently, "instead of just moving through the world without leaving a trace." She went very still. "Maybe," she said quietly. "I know where you are, Victoria," he said. "You don't have to be untraceable." She looked at him for a long moment. Her jaw moved slightly, the tell he'd learned, the one that meant she was feeling something she hadn't planned to feel and was deciding how to handle it. She handled it by nodding once, the firm, decisive nod he recognized, and then she said, "Saturday was good, Daniel." And she said it the way you say something that's actually true with no performance around it. "Yeah," he said. "It was." Emma came back at a run. "The dog's name is Rutherford," she announced. "Who names a dog Rutherford?" "Someone with strong opinions," Victoria said. "He was very cute, though," Emma said. She looked up at Victoria with her mother's eyes. "Are you coming back?" Victoria looked at Daniel briefly, then back at Emma. "I expect so," she said. "Good," Emma said, with the simple certainty of a child who has made a judgment and is not interested in debate. "You should come for pancakes again. I can show you my collection." "What do you collect?" Victoria asked. "Rocks," Emma said. "And buttons. And sometimes interesting leaves, but those don't last." She considered. "The rocks are the best part." "I would like to see the rocks," Victoria said seriously. Emma smiled full bright completely. "Sarah," and then turned and walked toward the car with her 2 borrowed books under her arm. Daniel watched her go. "She doesn't have a filter," he said. "I know," Victoria said. "I love it." He turned to look at her. She said it without thinking, without the parsing and deliberating she brought to almost every word. It had just come out direct and true, and he could see from her expression that she was aware it had, and that she wasn't pulling it back. He thought about a lot of things in that second. He thought about the flannel shirt in October, and the chipped mug, and the wrench mark in the concrete floor. He thought about Sarah, and the ring on his left hand, and the shape of the absence and the crack in the wall that let in light. He thought about 4 minutes on a parking garage floor, and $47,000, and Kevin's smug emoji, and Patrice's pause that said more than sentences. He thought about how the life you end up with almost never resembles the one you planned, and how the best moments inside it almost never announce themselves in advance. "Victoria," he said. She looked at him. He didn't have a sentence prepared. He'd spent 3 years preparing sentences and delivering them on time, and never leaving himself without a next line because that was what survival looked like when you were the only one keeping everything upright. But right now, on a Saturday sidewalk in Millbrook, Ohio, with Emma 20 feet away, inspecting something on the sidewalk, and October all around them, he didn't have a sentence. He just said, "I'm glad your chair broke." She blinked. And then she laughed, the real one, the full one, the one that transformed her face, and it went straight through him, like it had from the very first time he heard it, that short, surprised, genuine thing that she couldn't seem to control, and didn't try to. "That might be the strangest thing anyone has ever said to me," she said when she recovered. "Is it wrong?" he said. She looked at him for a moment, still with that warmth in her face, still with the guard down. "No," she said. "It's exactly right." Her driver came around and opened the door. She moved toward the car, then stopped and looked back at him one more time. "Daniel," she said. "Yeah." A pause. She opened her mouth, and he saw something move across her face, something that had been there for 3 days, maybe longer. Something that lived right at the edge of what she said out loud and what she kept inside the walls. Her lips moved very slightly, and then she closed them and shook her head once the smallest motion and said instead, "Thank you for the pancakes." But it wasn't what she'd been about to say. He knew that. He knew it the way you know things that are true before they've been spoken. He nodded. "Thursday," he said, "when you're back from Columbus." "Thursday," she said. He watched the car pull out, stood on the sidewalk until it was gone. Emma appeared at his elbow. "She almost said something," she observed. He looked down at his daughter. "What do you mean?" "At the end," Emma said. She started to say something and then didn't. She tilted her head. "What do you think it was?" He thought about dark eyes and a cracked laugh, and a woman who drove 4 minutes across a parking garage floor alone and got up without asking anyone for help, who had been moving through the world at full speed for so long she'd forgotten she could slow down, who had sat in his shop on a rainy Tuesday night and drunk coffee from a chipped mug and told him things she didn't tell anyone, and who had just now stood on a sidewalk in October and almost let something all the way through. "I don't know," he said. Emma nodded slowly, considering. Then she took his hand, just slipped her small hand into his, the way she did sometimes without ceremony, and started walking toward the car. "I think she's going to," Emma said. "Going to what?" "Say it," Emma said. "Whatever it was, I think she's going to say it." He held his daughter's hand and walked and said nothing. But something in him, something that had been holding very still for a very long time, moved slightly, turned toward something, like a door on a hinge that was finally carefully beginning to open. He drove them home. He raked the leaves that afternoon, and Emma helped for 20 minutes before sitting in the pile she'd built and reading her new book. He watched her from across the yard. He thought about Thursday. He thought, let her say it. Whatever it was, let her say it. He'd be there. Thursday came the way significant days always came, looking exactly like any other day until it didn't. Daniel was at the shop by 6:30, which was normal. He had a Silverado with a transmission issue waiting in Bay 1 and a Subaru that needed brake pads in Bay 2, and he worked through both of them steadily and without thinking too much about the afternoon, because thinking too much about the afternoon was not going to help the Silverado's transmission. Kevin stopped by at 9 with coffee from the gas station up the road, which was Kevin's version of a gesture, and sat in the plastic chair and watched Daniel work with the comfortable silence of a man who didn't need to fill space with noise. "She's back from Columbus today," Kevin said eventually. Daniel didn't look up from the transmission. "I know." "You talking to her?" "Yeah." Kevin nodded, sipped his coffee. "Good," he said. And that was all he said about it, which was another thing Daniel valued about Kevin. He knew when a thing had been said enough. Patrice called at 11. He let it ring twice before answering, which was the amount of time it took to set down a tool without dropping it. "I'm not calling about Victoria," Patrice said immediately. Okay, he said. I'm calling because Emma left her math homework at my house, and I'm dropping it at the school. Thank you. A pause. How are you feeling? She said. About Emma's math homework. Daniel. He leaned against the workbench. I'm feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, he said. Which is probably accurate. It's completely accurate, Patrice said. That's actually the correct feeling to have right now. That's not especially comforting. I know, she said. But here's what I know for certain, and I'm saying this as the person who watched you hold yourself together with nothing but willpower. For 3 years you deserve this. You deserve to not know what you're doing for a minute. You deserve to be scared of something that isn't a bill, or a diagnosis, or a broken piece of equipment. She paused. Sarah would tell you the same thing. You know she would. He was quiet for a moment. His hand went to the ring on his left hand, the old habit, the reflex. Yeah, he said. I know. Call me after, she said. Patrice. I'll be up, she said. Call me. She hung up. He stood holding the phone for a moment, then set it on the workbench and went back to the transmission. He finished both jobs by 2. He cleaned up the bays with more thoroughness than he typically brought to a Thursday afternoon, wiping the workbench down, racking the tools in their proper places, sweeping the floor around the crack he still hadn't fixed, and was now half thinking of leaving because it had become a kind of marker for him, a date on a calendar made of concrete. He changed his shirt in the back because he kept a spare for when he had afternoon appointments that required looking like a person. He put the green flannel back on, without thinking about it, until he was already wearing it, and then he thought about Emma saying the green flannel is the nice one and left it on. He was at the desk reviewing the week's invoices when his phone buzzed. Victoria. A text this time, not a call. Back in Millbrook. Columbus was productive. Board approved the Q4 budget. Gerald Whitmore was wrong again, data and all. I'm told I should tell people when I arrive somewhere rather than just appearing. I'm practicing. He read it twice. Then he typed back. How's the chair running? Her response came in under a minute. Perfectly. Quieter every day like you said. He typed, good. Shop's open. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Which was unusual. Victoria Langston did not seem like a woman who struggled to complete a sentence. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. He put the phone down and went back to the invoices and didn't read a single one. She arrived in 18 minutes. He heard the BMW, and then the lift, and then the quiet hum of the power chair on the ramp, and he was at the workbench doing nothing in particular with his hands when she came through the door he'd left open. She looked different than she'd looked Saturday. Not her appearance. She was in work clothes again, the charcoal blazer, the armor, but something in how she was carrying herself. Slightly less braced, like someone who had been on a long drive and had used the time to think through something they'd been avoiding. Gerald Whitmore sounds exhausting, he said. He is, she said. He means well. He just means well very loudly and without sufficient preparation. She stopped in the middle of the bay. The drive back was long. I had a lot of time to think. About Q4 budget allocation, he said. No, she said. He set down the thing he was holding, a wrench he'd picked up without needing it, and looked at her. She was looking back at him with the direct, steady gaze he'd come to recognize as her real face, the one underneath the professional composure, the one that appeared when she'd decided to stop managing the distance between herself and a thing. On Saturday, she said, at the end, outside the cafe. I remember, he said. I was going to say something, she said. I know, he said. She didn't react to that, didn't ask how he knew. Didn't deflect. She just continued looking at him with that steadiness that was. He understood now, not coldness, but its opposite, the discipline of someone who felt things at full volume and had spent years learning to turn the dial down because full volume was too exposed. I've been thinking about why I didn't say it, she said. And I think it was because... She paused. Because saying it out loud makes it real. And real things can go wrong. And I have spent a very long time structuring my life so that the things most likely to hurt me are the things I've kept at the greatest distance. I know that too, he said. You do the same thing, she said. I do the same thing, he agreed. She moved the chair slightly, a small adjustment. A centering. And he understood that it was what she did when she was gathering herself the physical equivalent of a breath. I've built a good life, she said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not... She searched for the word. I'm not someone who needs rescuing. I don't need someone to complete me. I don't believe in that. I believe in people who are already whole choosing to be in each other's orbit because it makes the whole thing better, not because they're filling a hole. Okay, he said. I'm saying that because I want you to understand that what I'm about to say is not coming from loneliness or Victoria, he said. She stopped. I know, he said. I know what it's coming from, and I know what it's not coming from. You don't have to build the argument first. You can just say the thing. Something happened in her face. The tightness in her jaw released slightly, the way a held breath releases. I wish you were mine, she said. The shop went completely quiet. She said it the way she said everything real directly, without softening, without the performance of vulnerability. Just the plain true words in their plain true order. Her eyes didn't drop. Her chin didn't dip. She said it, and she held his gaze the way someone holds a position they've decided on and will not retreat from, because she was at her core a person who committed fully to what she believed and faced the consequences. But he could see it under the steadiness behind the direct eyes how much it had cost her to say it. The slight line between her brows. The way her hands rested too still on the armrests. The courage it took for someone who had built her entire architecture around not needing things to say plainly that she needed this. He crossed the shop floor. He stopped in front of her, not hovering, not looming, just close enough that she had to look up slightly to hold his gaze. I've been wearing this ring, he said, because I didn't know how to be someone who had moved forward. Because moving forward felt like leaving her. Like choosing a future she didn't get to have. He looked down at his hand for a moment, the gold band worn smooth at the edges. I asked Emma about it last Sunday. I finally asked her. Victoria was very still. She said... He stopped, cleared his throat. She said, Daddy, Mom would want you to be happy. That's what she always wanted. And I want that too. And then she went back to her rocks. He exhaled slowly. 8 years old. Extraordinary, Victoria said quietly. She's extraordinary, he agreed. He looked back at Victoria. I took the ring off Sunday night. I put it in the box in the closet where I keep the things I'm not ready to get rid of, but don't need to carry every day. He spread his hand, left hand bare. I've been carrying it for 3 years. It was time. Victoria looked at his hand, then up at his face. I'm not asking you to fill anything, he said. I'm not asking you to fix anything. The shop's still mine. Emma's still my whole world. The bills are manageable now. I'm not... He paused. I'm not a project, and I'm not looking for someone to hold me up. He met her eyes. But I have been looking without knowing I was looking for someone I could be honest with. Someone who doesn't need me to be fine when I'm not fine. Someone who comes in from the rain with her jaw set tight and drinks coffee from a chipped mug and tells me the hard true thing instead of the comfortable one. Her lips parted slightly. You do all of that, he said. Without trying. You just... He shook his head once. You just walked in, and you were exactly that person. I nearly ended up in a lobby fountain, she said, and her voice wasn't quite steady. But you didn't, he said. You came in, and you let me fix what was broken, and then you stayed, and we talked, and nothing about it felt like work. He paused. Nothing about you feels like work, Victoria, and I haven't been able to say that about anything in a long time. She blinked, once slowly with the deliberateness of someone keeping something back by will alone. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I know how to run a company. I know how to manage a board and negotiate a contract and walk into a room of people who underestimate me and change their minds before I leave. But this—" She gestured between them, the small motion encompassing everything that had happened in the last week. "I haven't let myself want something like this in long enough that I've forgotten how to do it without building a case for it first." "You don't need a case," he said. "You made one on Saturday. You made one just now. You don't need any more." She looked at him. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "And I'm not going to look at you like you're something to be fixed or pitied or managed. I'm going to look at you like you're someone I want to know. All of it. The CEO and the board meetings and Gerald Whitmore and the parking garage floor and the chair and the mother who sends birthday cards on the exact right day. All of it." Something in her eyes went very bright for just a second. Not tears, she was too controlled for that, and the control was real. It was part of her, he wouldn't ask her to remove it. Just a brightness that passed through quickly and left something warmer in its wake. "You have very good instincts," she said, "for someone whose primary job is internal combustion engines." "Internal combustion and broken things," he said. "I've had a lot of practice." She reached out then, a deliberate gesture, unhurried, and put her hand over his. Her hand was smaller than his smooth, where his were rough and warm, and it rested on top of his hand with a certainty that matched everything else about her. "I wish you were mine," she said again, quieter this time. Not a confession, the second time a statement. Like she was setting it down as a fact now that she'd found it was true. He turned his hand over, held hers. "I think I already am," he said. They stayed like that for a moment, just that. His hand in hers. The shop around them quiet and warm and ordinary. The fluorescents humming the October light going gold through the bay windows. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just two people who had spent years learning how to stand alone, standing near each other. He pulled over the stool and sat down, because standing there with his heart doing what it was doing, while she kept looking at him like that was more than a man should have to manage on a Thursday afternoon. And she almost smiled, that almost smile he'd learned in the space of 1 week, the way you learn the syntax of a language you already somehow know. "Emma's going to have opinions," he said. "Emma already has opinions," Victoria said. "She asked me Saturday if I had a dog." "What did you say?" "I said I'd never had one. She said I should get one, and she would help me pick it." She paused. She suggested a name. "What name?" "Rutherford," she said. He put his hand over his face. A laugh came out of him, a full one, the real kind, uncontrolled from somewhere deep in the chest. He hadn't heard himself laugh like that in so long that the sound of it surprised him slightly, like a note from an instrument you forgot was in the room. Victoria was smiling, the full one, the real one, the one that made her look like herself. "She's going to be insufferable about this," he said once he could. "She's going to be wonderful about it," Victoria said. "She's going to be exactly what she is." "Yeah," he said. "She is." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at her. "What happens now?" he said. "Now," she said, "we figure it out." She said it the way she said everything, with precision, with confidence, with the calm of someone who was afraid, but had decided that being afraid was not a sufficient reason to stop moving forward. "I don't have a plan. I want to be honest about that. I have contingency plans for most things, but I don't have one for this." "Me neither," he said. "We'll have to build it as we go," she said. "I'm good at that," he said. "Building things." "I know," she said. "I've seen your work." Outside, Millbrook moved through its Thursday afternoon. A truck went past on the main road. Somewhere down the block, someone was using a leaf blower, the distant mechanical drone of autumn upkeep. The shop held its particular warmth, the warmth of a working place at rest of tools on pegboards and oil smell and good, honest labor. They talked for 2 hours. Not about anything significant. Not about what came next or how it would work. Not about logistics or timelines or the dozen practical complications that two people from different worlds building something together would eventually have to navigate. They talked about small things. She told him about Columbus, a bookshop she'd found near the hotel, a particular bridge over the river where she'd stopped for 20 minutes watching the water because she'd needed to think. He told her about Emma's rock collection, which had 47 specimens labeled in Emma's handwriting on pieces of masking tape. She told him about the first company she'd tried to start at 26, which had failed completely and publicly, and had been, in retrospect, the education that made everything after it possible. He told her about the week he'd bought the shop, how terrified he'd been, how Sarah had driven him there the night before the closing and made him stand outside and look at it until he stopped shaking. "Did it work?" she asked. "Mostly," he said. "I was still a little shaky at the signing." "That's appropriate," she said. "You should shake a little when you take on something that matters." He looked at her. "I've been shaking a little all week," he said. She held his gaze. "So have I," she said, "for what it's worth." At 4:45, she said she had to go a call at 5. She couldn't move something she'd moved twice already, and couldn't move again. She said it with the slight regret of someone who meant it, not the social performance of needing to leave. He walked her to the door. The ordinary courtesy of it holding the door. The ramp. The space had a different weight to it now, not the weight of practicality, but of chosen attention of someone who wanted to be where she was because she was there. Her driver was waiting as always. Patient man. He'd probably learned patience, the way you learn things in this particular job. She stopped at the bottom of the ramp. "Saturday," she said. "Saturday," he confirmed. "Same place." "Same place," he said. "Emma already told me she's ordering the blueberry pancakes again." "Tell her Rutherford is a good name," Victoria said. "I'm not telling her that," he said. "She'll start looking for actual dogs." "She's already looking," Victoria said, and there it was, the short laugh, the real one, the one that broke through her composure like light through a shutter, and he felt it the same way he'd felt it the first time, and the second time, and every time, like a hand on a door that had been closed a long time, finally turning the handle. She drove up the ramp to the lift. He watched the mechanism raise her and settle her and the door close, and the BMW pull smoothly out of the lot. He watched the taillights until they turned the corner and disappeared the way he'd done Tuesday, the way he'd done every time. But this time he didn't stand there wondering. This time, he knew. He went back into the shop. The late light was coming through the bay windows at a long angle, turning the dust motes gold, warming the floor. He stood in the middle of the bay for a moment and looked around at all of it. The tools on the pegboard, the Silverado he'd fixed that morning, the crack in the concrete, the 2 coffee mugs still in the drying rack from Tuesday. The small piece of everything that had led to this particular Thursday afternoon in this particular place. He picked up his phone and called Patrice. She answered on the first ring. "Well," she said. "She said it," he said. A silence. Then very quietly, "She said what?" He thought about the shop in the rain, about the mechanical whine on the ramp, and the jaw set tight, and the woman who came in soaking wet from a rainy Tuesday, and didn't ask for help. He thought about coffee and chipped mugs, and the thing that refused to file, and a laugh that broke through composure like light. He thought about a hand resting on his warm and certain, and 2 words said twice the first time, like a confession, the second time, like a fact. "She said she wished I were hers," he said. Patrice made a sound. It was not a word. It was just a sound from somewhere below language, from the place where relief and joy, and 3 years of watching your brother hold everything together alone, finally got to set something down. "And," she said. "And I told her I already am," he said. Another silence. Then Daniel. "Yeah. Sarah would be so—" She stopped. He heard her steady herself. "She'd be so happy," she said. "She would be so completely happy." He stood in the middle of the shop holding the phone and let that land. Let it be true. Let it sit alongside everything else that was true. The grief, and the ring in the box, and the picture on the refrigerator, and Emma in the leaf pile with her book, and discovered that it fit, that it belonged. That happiness and loss weren't opposite rooms, but the same room, the same ongoing place you lived in, and that it was possible it turned out to hold both at once, without either one canceling the other out. "I know," he said. "Okay," Patrice said. "Okay. Now let me ask you the important question. What did Emma already call it?" He laughed. "Emma called it on the way to the cafe," he said. "She knew before I did." "Of course she did," Patrice said with the warmth of someone who had been watching an 8-year-old be extraordinary for 3 years. "She's Sarah's daughter." "She really is," he said. He locked up the shop at 5:30, the same way he locked it every day. Lights off bays, secure front door, double-checked. His hands knew the routine so well, they didn't need instruction from the rest of him. He drove home through Millbrook in the late October light, through the streets he'd driven 10,000 times past the hardware store and the bakery and the coffee shop on Clement, and the turn that took him out toward Route 9, where the other shop sat with its loyalty app and its working coffee machine, and its attempt to be what this town needed. He drove past all of it, the way you drive past things that are part of your life, without being the whole of it. He pulled into the driveway. He could see Emma through the kitchen window. Patrice was with her. They were making something at the counter, flour apparently involved, based on the state of Emma's hair, and Emma was talking with the full-body animation she brought to subjects she cared about. Hands moving, eyes bright. He sat in the truck for a moment and watched her. Then he got out. He went inside. Emma turned and said, "Dad, we're making cookies, and Aunt Patrice says I can't lick the spoon, but that rule is wrong and unjust." And he said, "Lick the spoon." And Patrice threw a dish towel at him, and the kitchen smelled like butter and sugar, and the radiator was clicking the way it always did in October, and the sunflower magnet was still holding Emma's picture on the fridge. He looked at the picture, the two of them stick figures holding hands outside the shop. Emma had drawn him with gray in his hair, which he'd noticed and not said anything about, because it was accurate, and Emma was Sarah's daughter, and Sarah's people didn't soften the true thing. He thought about the corner table at Clement Street Cafe, and a woman with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, and 40 questions answered without condescension, and a laugh that broke through composure like light. He thought about Thursday and Saturday, and what got built between them, and what was still being built, the ongoing project of two people deciding to stop moving through the world alone and start moving through it toward each other. He thought, this is how it happens. Not with a plan. Not with a roadmap or a timeline or a strategy meeting. It happens in a broken chair on a rainy Tuesday night. It happens in the space between what you almost say and what you finally do. It happens slowly and then all at once. And then it's simply there, true and solid and real. The way the best repairs always are, the kind that hold not because they're new, but because they're right. He put his hand on Emma's shoulder. She leaned into him without looking up, the automatic warmth of a child who knew where home was. Some things you fix. Some things fix you. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough, if you leave the door open and the coffee on and the lights burning after closing time, the thing that needed fixing walks in from the rain and changes everything. And you realize that the life you thought you were just holding together was actually all along becoming something worth holding on to.